So, welcome everyone. A very warm welcome from us at the ICF Foundation, which has been our endeavor to bring coaching and the impact of coaching into the social and cultures and integrate it as part of a thriving society that we live in. My name is Jass Malaney. I have been the Council of Ambassador for the ICF Foundation, and this is the second year that I have been in this position. Every quarter, we bring such webinars and generate interest among the coaching community to see how they can be more involved in taking coaching into our real worlds. And today we are very, very honored to have a topic which is so important. And it is something that we all need to start really considering bringing into our conscious coaching conversations. And Dr. Josie McLean, who is the co-founder for the Climate Coaching Alliance. We are very honored to have you here, Josie, to share with us from your years of experience and share more with us about how we can use our coaching and make that impact. Allow me to do some introduction for Dr. Josie, and she is such an accomplished individual with so many uh, experiences that I will take a moment and would need to refer to a document that would help me to share all of this. Now, Josie McLean is a PCC. She's here today with us to share what she has learned about applying our coaching skills to the greatest challenge that humanity has faced. That is of the ecological and climate crisis. Now, this is important today because Antonio Guterres, who is from the United Nations Secretary, in his latest meeting at the Community of Practice in Egypt last week, has shared this. Humanity is on a highway to hell. Now, saying that the flight for a livable planet could be won or lost in this decade. Now, this statement does sound very extreme, right? But there are few people in position to make this judgment. This statement has shocked us, yes, but it is also given us an opportunity to start spending some time together to think about what role we or coaching can play in turning this around. How can the shift from the industrial growth society, a life sustaining civilization, to to move into this encompassing this challenge that the IPCC scientists are saying, and we are to respond to it now and not just leave it for our future generations, saying that, okay, let them deal with it. The reason for this is that time is short. We have a crisis happening with us now. Now, Josie's perspective on this challenge and the role of coaching at the time at the time when human history is quite unique. She tells us the story of her awakening of the crisis when she was in a conversation with Sir John Whitmore and one of the founders of organizational coaching in UK in 2003. She was the president of the ICF Australasia at that time and was subsequently awarded the Global ICF President Award for her leadership in 2009. Now, from 2003, Josie has volunteered as a global activist at the Panchamana Alliance in San Francisco and to learn about living a sustainable life. Now, she's also learned adaptive leadership at the Harvard University and studied the systems thinkings and complexity with some of the world's finest system thinkers, including Peter Senge, Margaret Wheatley, Fitzgerald Capra, Otto Sharman, and read Donella McDowell's work extensively. She's also done a doctoral thesis, and the topic of that was embedding sustainability into organizational DNA, a story of complexity, with an expression of systemic group coaching, and was awarded the Dean's Condemnation for Thesis Excellence. Josie has founded the partnership. It is a boutique consulting and coaching firm from 1999, and they work with CEOs and executive teams, management teams, to develop leadership with systemic change capabilities. Today, she feels her time has come to do the transformational work, and she has researched so long to do so. We are very honored to have Josie with us. And there is another delightful surprise in this session where she has now published her third book, and it is edited in collaboration with Eve Turner and Alison Vibro, who are fellow co-founders of the Climate Coaching Alliance, and with Professor Peter Hawkins. And this book has just been released on the 14th of November. And I'm very sure she will share more about CCA and her work. Please join me to welcome Dr. Josie McLean. Over to you, Josie.
Thank you very much, Jazz. And that's a long introduction, I know, but it's been a long life. You know, the hair is grey. So you can fit a lot in when you've lived so long. So it's great to see you here and to also see a few faces that are familiar. So thank you for coming along and giving up some of your time and energy for this really crucial conversation. It can get a bit, now sometimes I think it can be a bit like having a soundtrack that is Star Wars, Darth Vader. Is anyone else Star Wars? It's kind of me. I'm a science fiction freak. Anyone else like? I don't know if you remember the way the soundtrack sounds. Darth Vader's signature tune, but it goes a bit like do 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 do. It's very ominous and threatening, and you've got it, John. You've got the lighter side though. And it can be dark and oppressive. And I think that's one of the reasons that we tend not to talk about this particular topic. But on the other side, I think is light, is the opportunity to actually live and to have work that is deeply meaningful and purposeful, to actually have work that's contributing to what I think is, and what many people that I talk with, but I am a bit select in the circles that I talk, I must admit. But it's the challenge of our time. And I don't know how aware people are. And that is one of the things that we can contribute at this time as coaches, is actually just raising awareness. And you don't have to be an activist to do that. You can just be a person, like a person getting on doing their work. So there's a role for everyone in this challenge. And there is a very particular role, I think, for coaches that I want to talk about today. And that role is really about using the skills, talents, techniques, the ways of being that we've been developing for the last 20 or 30 years as an industry, and applying them to this huge transformational change opportunity and need that exists within society. So this is work that I have been involved in for a period of time. And I want to share a little bit about why and how, and answer any of the questions that you have. And I don't know what questions you've got. You might all be at different stages of I expect you are, of your journey around this. So I welcome you into this journey, whether you're just at the very beginning or whether you're advanced. We go on learning together. This is a path that's unfolding. as we walk it together. So I've got a bit of an agenda in mind, and I've got slides, you know. I don't want to bore you with them, but I've got slides. But we can go off track if we want to. We don't have to let the slides rule our world, you know. So I'm really curious. I'm wondering what questions you're arriving with, or perhaps what drew you here would be another way of asking that question. And we're just a small enough, intimate enough group. I think it's really delightful. For people to be able to come off mute and just share what those questions are, so that I've got a bit of context as to where you are, or just a couple of comments around what drew you here. It would be lovely to hear from you. If you don't want to speak, drop it into the chat box.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that we bring it up to you.
Thank you. What drew you here?
I'm happy to go first.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Anna in Auckland, New Zealand. I'm a chartered governance professional. So I'm interested in, I guess there's a lot of communication challenges in the climate change space generally. And the scenario that I'm particularly interested in is...
No?
Pardon?
I'm sorry, I missed all of that. I don't know if it was just me, but the audio cut out. Was it just me?
Okay.
Can you try again, Anna?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a chartered governance professional, which means I've done work sort of as a company secretary. I'm particularly interested in coaching directors or really influential leaders in C-suite teams to inform them about climate change, the risks and opportunities in really simple ways. Just because, you know, the topics are complex. So how can we break it down into simple messages so everybody has some understanding and doesn't just put it in the too hard box or leave it to the specialists?
Oh, it's such a great question. And that could keep us going for half a day alone, Anna.
Yeah.
I may not
Thank
get
you.
to answer it all, but it's a great question to be sitting with. Thank you. Is there anyone
Thank you.
else?
Are you, Stavrini, are you on, you're on mute? If you're saying something, we can't hear you. Could you please try to unmute?
Hey everyone. So I am a member of ICF Greece. So and also I'm a member of the Environment Committee of ICF Greece. And we are doing events throughout the year for all the members. So what I'm interested is how we can make an impact for our members to be so that they can have an impact on their clients. We are doing a lot of actions out in nature, but it's not clear to me how we go about making an impact to our clients during the session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And is it Stavrini? Have I got?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Stavrini. And
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being up. Is it early morning for you?
Yes, it's 6 o'clock. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it might be early. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope it's worth your while. Okay, and I can see we've got a couple of comments in the chat box too. From Jason, how to use coaching to help in this space, which is a little bit similar to your question, Stavrini, but on the other side, I think as an input rather than output, and you're interested in the impact side. And from Lunka, good morning, everyone. Pleased to meet. From South Africa, welcome. I'm so glad you're with us. and it's probably early for you there too. Your organisation is starting to drive ESG, so environment, social, governance agenda. We need to build leadership capability to drive this agenda and resultant cultural transformation. Interested in how coaching could augment our leadership training efforts. Yeah. So you've touched on the topic of my PhD research, I think, Lumka, and I think coaching does have a role to play. I'm not going to cover that quite so much today, but I want to allow some space at the end. So perhaps we'll circle back to these questions as well. And one from Katie, how we raise awareness and help leaders truly connect. I do hope that we cover that, and it will build into the question that Lumka's asked as well. Okay, let's make a start. So I'll share a couple of slides if I can. And Jass, if I, because I'm in a hotel and the internet connection is not so reliable here, please give me a wave or something if I am not connecting as well as you hope.
Sure, got it.
Okay, so actually I might just leave the slides like that. Are you okay with that? You can see them all, but I can jump around more easily from here.
Sure, Josie, that works for us. We can see
Sure.
everything.
Terrific, thank you. So I'll just get that out over there. So it's interesting that you've actually in your questions already assumed that it's okay and that coaches should be involved in this topic. And I was just wondering as I was preparing for the conversation if that might be the case. So I thought I'd say a few things about that, just covering off at a very base level, because my assumption is that everyone agrees with me and that we should be doing this work. But indeed, there are many coaches who believe that this is not work for coaches. And I want to start by just addressing that first. And secondly, to introduce you to our latest book that Jass mentioned in the introduction. And I thought I might use the shape of that book to inform the rest of my presentation with you and try to answer some of those questions as I go. I've got some resources to share with you that we'll give you a link to after my presentation or towards the end, and plenty of time for Q&A at the end too, I hope. So let's make a start, shall we? Don't you hate technological troubles? So this is my starting point. Should coaches even be involved in this work? My answer is yes, quite clearly, because I think, and from my association with John Whitmore way back in 2003, and I don't know how many of you ever met John, but you did, Jass? Yeah, it's a lovely man. And, you know, one of the things I can remember him saying to me was that he actually believed that coaching emerged for this moment in time, that it's emerged in the Western world to help us raise consciousness, or another way of saying that, broaden and expand people's awareness so that we can deal with these more systemic issues. And I'd like to just touch on three elements of the questions around should coaches even be involved. One of the questions that coaches often ask me is it even professionally ethical? I kind of don't even understand that question, because we don't hesitate to ask people about their state of well-being, how they're feeling, what they think about, you know, their mental health being, their physical well-being, any of these other things. But for some reason, when we use the words climate change together or climate crisis, I think it becomes infused with the politics of the day, and we hesitate to go there. But actually, this is just a question of well-being. So that's the first thing I'd say. We're just talking about people's well-being, because if we don't have air to breathe, if we don't have water to drink, if we don't have food to eat, humans aren't going to be very well, are they? So it's kind of a no-brainer for me that we should be doing this. And it is ethically, it's ethically sound, and it's ethically sound within the ICF Code of Ethics. And so I just wanted to point you to this particular clause within the ICF Code of Ethics, where it says that we're aware of our clients' impacts on society, and we adhere to a philosophy of doing good versus avoiding bad. So we're actually trying to help people create better circumstances rather than just reduce harm. So I think it is ethical, and I would even go a step further and say it's unethical not to actually be doing work that includes this space because of the connections to our human well-being. Secondly, a lot of people ask me, well, if I raise these questions, I will risk being sacked. And perhaps that's true in some areas. I had a client, a potential referee of a new client, ring me just yesterday while I was at the airport waiting to come over to Melbourne. And he said, Josie, I know you're really good at what you do, but I've got this redneck financial institution CEO that I'd like you to work with. And I think you'll find your views really out there. And I said, well, I don't impose my views on my clients. And so I don't understand what you mean, really. And so I think the question then becomes, how do we work with our clients in the way that we usually work with clients in a coaching relationship without actually being activists and imposing our views on others? And that's really that's one of the questions that we've been trying to explore at the Climate Coaching Alliance for the last 3 years. And I want to just blow a little horn. We turned 3 in the last couple of weeks. So we're 3 years old now at the Climate Coaching Alliance, and I'll share a bit more about that later on. So I think you can actually work with people in a way that is on their terms and is certainly aligned with our usual coaching philosophy. And you don't necessarily have to lose work. I work in spaces where I engage with people who are already active in the sustainability space. So they are completely aligned with my worldview, and there are no problems there. And I've got to say that this is a growing space. So if you're looking for work opportunities, there are growing work opportunities in the green sustainability spaces. So it's a niche that is growing. So why wouldn't you be involved in it? And as I mentioned in the opening today, this is an opportunity for meaningful and impactful, purposeful work. Joanna Macy's believes it's the opportunity of a lifetime to actually be alive at this moment on this planet in order to help us make this shift. And it has to be made now. So should coaches even be involved? I think yes. Does anyone have a question around that before we move on? Or clarity? It doesn't have to be a question. Are you just looking for some clarity, or have you got a statement to make?
Josie, would you allow me to share that the work that the ICF Foundation is doing? It is absolutely meaningful when a coach has an opportunity to work with a leader. And because of that coaching, the ripple effect is seen with the whole organization. And in my personal experience, I was working with a leader at a nonprofit organization. And after the coaching sessions, he invited me back to the organization to see how, because of the coaching and the mindset change and the shifts that took place because of our conversation, the new interventions that were increased or stated in the organization brought back for them a larger impact in the shorter period of time, and with many more stakeholders who were so convinced to be part of that passion. And I think there was no dollar or money that can give you the joy and satisfaction to receive this kind of feedback as a coach, that I made this difference. And that was one of my driving force to continue to create this meaningful and impactful work which as the ICF Foundation, we continue to create opportunities for our coaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Jass. Yes, it's never to be overlooked, those ripple impacts. Yeah, thank you. So to share a little bit about the book that we've just released, actually published on the 14th of November, which was the Climate Coaching Alliance's 3rd birthday. And it's a book that Alison Wybrow, Eve and I co-edited with Peter Hawkins together. And sadly, Alison passed away in February this year. And so that disrupted the progress of the book, and also it was a huge thing to overcome her absence. So we finished the book, and we finish it in honor of Ali. And I'm sorry, it makes me emotional still. And honoring her spirit. And it's all through this book. So it's a book that's actually written in the style of a workshop over 7 days. And we invite you, the reader, in as participants in the workshop over 7 days, in a joint inquiry, trying to find out, how do we do this work around, as you were mentioning earlier, around coaching directors and C-suite people. How do we do this work with them? How do we introduce them into this work, and how do we move forward with it? And so it's a challenging book in many ways, because it brings us into the reality of where we really are. And most people, certainly in my social circles and perhaps in yours, are actually completely unaware of this tipping point that we are all sitting at for the next 7 years. Like, can we make this huge transitional shift in the remainder of this decade? And most people are unaware of how their lives will change if we don't. And it is quite disturbing. I was reading a book called Planet for All last night on the plane here, and I was reading a story of what life could be like for 4 young women in 2050 if we don't make this particular shift. And it brought me to tears as I was thinking about my children living there. So it is hugely challenging, and it is also hopeful. Hopeful because we've got a choice. It's our choice to make. And it's not about guilting people into it. It's actually about recognizing that if we don't face the reality of where we are, then how can we possibly go to where we need to be? Because we don't actually understand the challenges that we are trying to deal with. So the book also appreciates climate as a broad and deeply systemic challenge. So when we talk about climate change, we often think just about rising carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, but actually it's all related. It's related to, we've got climbing greenhouse gases because we've got a growing economy that increasingly uses emissions. It increasingly uses energy and creates emissions because we're trying to grow 2 to 3% per annum. So you can hear the connection to the economic system. And then as we are trying to produce those sorts of goods, we're persuading people to buy them. So you can hear the economic system and marketing in there again. And then companies go out and they exploit resources, they damage the ecology, the ecological system in order to find the resources, and they transport them all over the place, and that's more emissions. And so you can hear how it's all kind of a huge messy system, and that's exactly what it is. It's a broad and deeply systemic issue that's underpinned by a number of cultural assumptions that have pervaded our Western society. I'm very conscious of that. I'm coming to you from Australia, the land that is home to a group of people that have managed to live here sustainably for 65,000 years or more. And so this is a cultural thing, not a human thing. It's not that humans are wrong or humans are bad. It's just that we've been mistaken as a culture. It's served us well until this point, and now we need to change some of the assumptions that we're holding. So this book explores how coaching is and will evolve to help us actually challenge some of those underlying assumptions. And isn't that what we're good at as coaches? Like, isn't that a part of what we do all the time, all day? You've already got the skills to do this, but maybe it's becoming more aware of the assumptions that you're listening for and that you might raise and put on the table for people to evaluate for themselves. Is this going to serve them well into the future or not? That's the decision they've got to make, and you can't make it for them, of course. So the book is both theoretical and pragmatic, and it contains the voices of over 70 coaches from around the world, a lot of them connected to us at the Climate Coaching Alliance, as they share their stories of how they personally awoke to this challenge, how they work from their own values with this challenge, and also the stories of the way they're actually innovating their practices as well. And the book unfolds in the stages that are aligned with the eco cycle that the CCA developed with, it's a cycle that actually began with Peter Hawkins way back in 2019, but it evolved as he was in conversation with the Climate Coaching Alliance. And so the copyright now is to both of us. So this is the eco phase model that the book is built around. So the 7 days take us through the journey of this model. And I wonder if you look at it, you can start to identify where you might be on this particular phase model. It kind of begins at curious, and I'll go through each one of these stages. But just as you read those descriptors on the screen for a moment, I'm wondering if you can pop into the chat box which stage you think you might be at. And perhaps it's at this moment in time on this particular day, because I think it shifts around a lot. So if you just read those descriptors and pop into the chat box where you think you are.
So, Josie, we have some inputs in the chat. Some are active, engaged, somewhat aware and engaged, active, informed, and aware.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And thanks for sharing that, Jazz, because I'd lost the chat box on my screen. Much appreciated. So let's just have a look at these. So usually we start at curious. It seems kind of the logical place to start. But you know, there's a phase before curious. And the phase before curious is kind of unaware. Unaware at all that there's a need to be curious, I think. And sometimes in the narrative that we hear from our clients, you can determine whether someone's actually open to discovering more or not. And if they're not, then you've got to wait for the moment in time to help them move into the curious space. So I'm going to start at curious, but I'm aware that actually there's a step before. So this is a gorgeous picture, and I can't even remember when it was taken. And in fact, the lovely Fiona found this during the week, and I'd forgotten this photo completely. I've got no idea when it was taken, except that it was a long time ago when my hair was brown. As you're thinking about becoming curious, usually there's something before that curiosity. Like there is this period of awakening, and my awakening was actually in a conversation with John. And I can remember, and John Raymond, you might have been there, the 2003 ICF conference in Sydney that John came out for. Yeah, you were. And I can remember sitting in the little lounge. It was at the Star Casino. And we were sitting in a little lounge and chatting. And we were chatting about the type of work that John was doing with some clients in the Middle East at the time. And he just turned casually to me and he said, there'll be wars over water, you know. And in that moment, something happened to me on the inside. And I can't even describe it to this day, but it was almost like I disappeared from being in the Star Casino at that point in time. John went on talking to some other people that were sitting around the table, and I felt like I had just disappeared from this space, and something inside me just clicked around. And when I came back into the space, maybe only seconds later, but it felt like minutes, everything had realigned within me, and I was aware that humanity was on a really unsustainable trajectory. I can't explain it more than that, but it was a really genuine epiphany. And I think many people have an awakening that is either an epiphany like that, or I've heard other people talking about becoming slowly aware over a period of time. But there is this moment of awareness where you go, actually, we can't keep doing this. And you become curious about what's possible, about needing to know more so that you can find out what's possible. And there's kind of at least two ways of finding out more, I think. One is looking towards the science. Now, I could give you a whole heap of scientific facts, and I'm just looking to my notes here, if you can forgive me for a moment. Because you've probably heard all of these facts before, and we keep giving them to people, but as coaches, we know that telling people stuff doesn't make a lot of difference, does it? In telling people stuff, you've actually got to help them make sense. And I think the second way of raising awareness is a way that starts to answer the question, how do we work with people who are in this space, but they're not quite aware of what needs to happen yet? And we can refer them to their own lives. But first of all, I wanted to touch on the science. So science is one way of helping people satisfy their curiosity and start to become informed around what's going on. So, you know, there's statistics like the planet's average surface temperature has risen 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.01 degrees Celsius since 1880. And in fact, in Australia, that is now 1.5 degrees centigrade as of this year. So we've already hit the 1.5 degrees centigrade that Paris Agreement a couple of years ago was saying that we were trying to avoid. We're already there. It's a done deal. So how do we step back from that? And the 1.5 was considered the tipping point. It wasn't chosen just for the sake of choosing a number. Fossil fuel use is still on the increase. It's increasing 1.7% every year. And the growth in renewables is actually just absorbing some of the increased demand from that system that I was talking about earlier. So although we look at the growth in renewables and we go, yay, demand is increasing at the same pace. So, you know, we've got to go, oh, what are we going to do about that? There's some assumptions that we've got to be addressing. Global sea levels have risen at about 8 inches over the last century. We're losing species like it's going out of fashion. And there are 9 planetary boundaries, and we have passed 5 of them already, and we're into dangerous tipping point zones. Now, I can say all that, but it's hard to make meaning from it, isn't it? There's another book that I've been reading. I don't know about you, but I read about 3 or 4 books at the same time. I'm a glutton for punishment. But this is a beautiful book written by an IPCC lead author, so an Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change lead author, Joelle Gurgis, and she lives near Sydney, and she's an Australian, and she's written this really poetic book. Actually, it's well worth the read, brings you up to date around the science of climate change, but also brings you up to date with how people like her are feeling. Look at that bottom quote. Some days the growing awareness of just how bad things really are can't be neatly contained in the controlled channels of logic and reason. sometimes I just want to drop to my knees and howl like a child who can't understand the injustice of it all. The right thing to do is so obvious, and yet we seem unable to do it. I'd like to suggest to you that that's the role of coaching, that we know how to help people change, and we are increasingly understanding systemic change as well. So, whether you're working with individuals or you're working with people and groups of people who are trying to work with whole systems, this is something that coaches know how to do. So the other way, if just quoting scientific facts at people doesn't reach their hearts, and I don't think it does, the other way is to ask them, what are they noticing? So if you're with someone who is completely unaware of the need to change or not yet curious, and you are living in an area that is flooding for the 4th time in 3 years, you could say, what are you noticing? Why is that, do you think? Like, this is a coaching approach. You're just pointing to what's there. Or maybe you're in an area where the temperatures have just soared again, and there are people dying due to extreme heat. You can ask them, what are you noticing? I have a story from my own youth when I used to go fishing with my father, and I often share this with people. And I say, that's something that I can't do anymore, not just because my father's passed away, but actually you can't go fishing. It's all fished out. What are you noticing? And there's a piece of coaching research that's emerging at the moment that is actually about coaching in nature. And I think there was a post by Jonathan Passmore on LinkedIn just in the last few days. If you look that up, you would connect with some of the literature that he's been publishing around coaching in nature as well. Just reconnecting people with nature. It is a wonderful way forward. So sometimes I take groups of leaders out of the office, and we actually go into Cleveland National Park, which is not far from where I live, and we spend the day just actually out of the office and in nature. And at the end of the day, they invariably say, they take a deep breath and say, geez, that was good. And they remember, because they forgot. Like, we've built these artificial structures around us that have disconnected us. So just becoming aware of nature again and noticing what is going on in our surrounds and helping people join the dots for themselves is one way of actually moving through this curious into this informed space. So now we're either listening to the science or we're listening to nature, we're listening to our own lives, and we're noticing that something has changed. And as we become aware, it's not unusual for people to actually feel some emotions that aren't very pleasant. They can be emotions of grief, despair, they can be anger, frustration. Some of us try to bypass these unpleasant emotions, and then we just go into denial, I think. We skip through and we pretend that nothing's happening. I personally believe, and I've been following the work of Professor Jem Bendel for a little while now, and you may be familiar with him too. He's from the Deep Adaptation Network. And his work has been around actually getting people to feel these emotions. And I've been playing with that with groups of people too. You will hear climate scientists quite often when they present their science say things like, I'm going to talk about the planetary boundaries and how we're passing them, but I don't want to depress you. And they move on very quickly. I step in if I'm with any of those climate scientists and say, hold on a minute, we are just going to pause here for a moment. Let's just notice how that makes us feel. Let's actually just turn to each other for a moment and hear how that feels to hear that news. We don't have to make it better. we can actually just notice and witness how that makes us feel and sit with it. It's okay and uncomfortable, isn't going to kill us. Ignoring it might kill us. So let's just sit and notice the emotions and ask, what are those emotions asking us to do now? And let that emotion move us into motion. And I think the opportunity of just being with people through those emotions are huge. So as we become aware and the emotions start to move through us and we start to go, oh, okay, so we need to be doing things differently. We start to develop some skills to actually bring this topic into our conversations all the time. Now, I've got to say, I know these skills. I know some of these skills. I should do. I've been trying to do it for 20 years, right? But sometimes I'm human and it gets the better of me and I'm not very graceful about it. Sometimes frustration gets the better of me and I say things that I regret. Nevertheless, we can develop some practical skills to bring the topic into the conversation appropriately. And I want to suggest to you that there's different ways of thinking about this from our coaching perspective. The skill of actually contracting artfully is a skill that I've learned from Eve Turner. She is brilliant at it. And she has a beautiful slide with some of the questions that you might ask when you're contracting with your client, and you don't even have to mention the climate word. So you might contract with your client by asking and creating a bit of space for yourself to work systemically with people by asking questions like, where do you want to be in 10 or 15 years? Who do you think your clients will be then? What do you think they'll be caring about most? And these are just coaching questions, aren't they? You're not being an activist. You're just asking questions. And by contracting in that way, you can actually say, well, there's things going on in the world that are actually going to impact all of that. And we obviously need to talk about that as well. And so now you've introduced the topic and you've got the space to do the work that you need to do. If you leave it until the second or third coaching session, it's not ever going to happen. So getting it into the conversation in your contracting piece is really wise, and it is just serving your client. One of my friends, Neil Scotton in the UK, has this lovely story. Well, it's more of a question, really. He asks people, if your client was standing in the middle of the road and there was a bus coming down the road full speed and about to run your client over, would you push them out of the way? And so what's your response to that? Would you push them out of the way? They're about to get run over by a bus. You would, wouldn't you? You'd do something to alert them. This bus has climate and ecological crisis written in. And you're just serving your client by actually raising the topic. You're not serving them by not raising it. Businesses are going to go broke by not paying attention to this particular issue. People will, I hate to say it, but people are going to perish. Sea levels are rising. Jakarta is sinking. Bangladesh is flooding. New South Wales in Australia is flooding. People are losing their lives. If we care for people, we've got to raise this topic. Secondly, I'd like to say that your existing coaching skills will take you a long way. Asking people about what their real values are, how do they really want to live their lives, can be a really powerful question in itself. And I mentioned Neil Scotton a little bit earlier. If you Google him, you'll find a website where he has what he calls Neil's Wheel. And it's a really simple tool for opening up the conversation around different facets of someone's life. He offers free training courses in it, and you can download a whole heap of material there for nothing. And really, when people start to answer the question, how do I really want to live my life? And it's a question that a lot of people are asking themselves sort of in this endemic stage of the COVID experience now. they're going to need help to actually change life habits, the habits of a lifetime, the patterns of their lives that actually are informed by a set of values that perhaps they don't want to be involved with so much anymore. They actually want to live from a different set of values. And so coaching has a huge role there. Coaching, like psychology, though, was actually developed from an understanding of individuals, and it looked just at individuals in separation to other individuals. And increasingly, we are learning to see the system, and coaching is moving that way too. And so coaching is evolving into a systemic practice, I think, moving from the I to an I within a series of nested systems. So I don't know if you're familiar with your own body, for example. You are a living system, of course, and you are a series of nested systems. So if we go right down to the to perhaps a cell in your heart, the cell is whole and complete. It replicates itself, it reproduces itself, it regulates itself, and it's a whole and complete part of your heart, which does all of those things, replicates and repairs itself. And that heart is just part of your circulatory system, which is a part of a number of systems that actually make up your physical body. And then on top of that, we add your psychological nervous system. And so all of these nested systems work together, and there's you as a whole. And you are just a part of your family or the team that you are involved in at work. And that is just a whole and complete part of a larger social system, which is actually dependent upon a landscape and an ecology for its existence. And so you can see how it all moves together. It's a dynamic system, and it's a series of nested systems. And increasingly within coaching, we're starting to recognize that and finding ways of bringing this awareness into our coaching, so that it might mean that you're asking questions not just about this person, but helping them to understand the way they're actually fitting within those nested systems, and perhaps asking questions about other parts of the system that they don't normally bring their awareness to. In addition to that, expanding timeframes and the number of stakeholders, which is part of those nested systems, can be a way of drawing attention to a systemic pattern within the way someone's thinking as well. I won't go into that a lot just right now, but one of the really simple things to do is to take a larger time frame, perhaps take a time frame of 7 generations, and ask people how they think this is going to work. Like, how is this decision going to work over a larger time frame rather than just the coming quarter? And as I mentioned earlier, these cultural assumptions are a part of this systemic coaching as well. And so listening for the cultural assumptions that are being made and asking questions about them. And so as we become more engaged, we tend to become more active as well. And active is about taking responsibility more broadly. And so you might be thinking about how can you contribute to your profession, to the community of your profession. And the Climate Coaching Alliance is exactly one of those sorts of bodies. It's free and open to all. No one makes any money out of it. Or you might if you actually learn something from there and are able to apply it. But it's not designed as some money making. Actually, there's a contribution to the system that is professional coaching. So there's lots of ways you can contribute to that, and Ignite through the ICF Foundation is one of those ways. You might even think about reviewing your own business and its supply chains. Like, who do you use? How do you engage with buying products? Do you think about where they're actually produced? Do you think about the implications for the people who produce, the wages that were paid to produce the products that you consume, the resources that were used in making the products that you consume? So if you can start thinking about your business in this way, you can influence the way your business is actually contributing to doing harm or actually contributing to doing good by changing the way you you run your own business. And of course, there's the possibility of influencing politically. Now, that might be as simply as being aware of what the different political partners, political parties are actually standing for and voting accordingly. Or you might even get more active in that and become politically active in a party or something. So that's another choice as well. But usually as people go around that cycle, they tend to become more active as they know more and more. And one of the things that we've also realised through the Climate Coaching Alliance is that people move around this cycle. We don't sit on it dormantly for a period of time. Usually we're moving around it. We come to know things as we move around. And depending on how you're feeling, you can be at a different spot there every day. Depending upon what the topic is, you can be at a different spot. So I can see there's a number of comments in the chat. I'm just going to pause there and see if I can have a look at them. And maybe you've got some questions or curiosities or statements that you would like to share as well.
So Josie, thank you so much. This was quite a lot of awareness raising pointers and the grave reality that we are living in. And I'd like to add here that it is my take on our current environment is so, I would say we are living in absolute abundance, whereby all of the technological discoveries and everything that mankind has brought into making human lives better are easily accessible and available to us. And that is the big problem, is that are we really able to use it in a way that we can leave the planet with much more and making it even better? But the fact is, the environmental data that is brought to our attention shows it's not going to help us to leave anything behind if we start not putting in a conscious effort. And that's the big thing that we have as a coach. It is an privilege to me to be able to have these evoking awareness kind of conversations with my clients. And this is where we as coaches can engage more. And the ICF Foundation had one of its objective and setting up Ignite was to offer platforms to coaches of how they could actually want to play their part in doing their bit towards working on Ignite projects. Now, I'll take the opportunity to share some of our slides and talk more about it before we go into the next Q&A, which I'm sure you have a lot of questions that you would like to ask Josie. So in introducing the topic of climate change, the ICF Foundation has continued to bring the impact of coaching into the one-on-one conversations, which can be seen at a micro level, where we are making a difference to the individual leader that we are working with. However, if we were to look at our role as a coach, we are actually not just working with the individual leader. We are in fact able to raise their awareness as to how they are managing their teams. How are they being a leader and how are they developing further leaders in the organization? And then that takes them to creating an impact and changing the culture of the whole organization. And that further enhances all of the relationships that are available around the stakeholders for that organization. Now, this is at the meso level. As we continue to see the impact of those decisions that a leader is making, how it affects the community, and then it has a definite impact on the way the global systemic things are considered. And this I have seen time and again in working with leaders, especially with the nonprofit organization. I started my work career with the World Bank, and there were a number of projects in which we were funding, the bank was funding social sectors. And these projects were making such an impact on how the communities were responding. And as a result of that, how people's lives were getting better. So for me, this is the way an individual has to look at their strengths and see where is it that they can contribute and continue to create the impact that they need to. Because every action that we take at this conscious level is a win-win, because it will generate a ripple effect for us in our communities. So, good question that may be emerging for all of us is, what is mine to do now? Are you at this stage now? Can we have some sharing at this stage? So I invite you to think about what could be some things that you would like to do. And depending on the model that Josie shared, where are you? Are you at the level of being engaged, active, just creating the awareness?
Maybe I
Yes,
can.
Laura.
share.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Sure. Laura
You go,
first
Laura.
and then John.
Thank you. Thank you. So, thanks a lot, Josie, just for this beautiful meeting. I was sharing that it's really, really crucial at this moment, I think. And many things that Josie shared, a lot inside input. So I just start from my personal experience, just as it is. I'm a coach and accredited certified by ICF, and since ever my source of resilience, inner peace, calm, that was nature. Walking barefoot in the nature for me is my strength. So last summer I decided to switch my coach into nature, into the park. Moved by the sense that I'm living in China, in Beijing. So where situation is quite still very, very chaotic, and people are under stress, psychological stress, depression for COVID, for many things. So in that moment, we were just out from 1 month of lockdown, and I felt the need to go barefoot into the nature. And I said, I want to bring people and having the same effect. So I started really to coach people with the trees into the nature, following some nature coaching, is actually practicing. And I was amazingly surprised how much people are not connected with the nature. How the only fact to have our mindfulness also coaching, my coaching, have a mindfulness coach walk in the nature, for them was everything. And that most of the people told me, I never done that. So that's encouraged me and motivated me a lot in doing my coach inquiry, as I do on Zoom, on person, but with the tree, the nature, and just leave people to hug the trees, get the question to the trees. So for me, it was an amazing experience in realizing how people are so far from the nature. And that's coming to the word awareness. Without awareness, I think we are not going anywhere. So as coach, I would say, how can I ignite or build up more awareness in order to get the people one by one to go into action? Because I believe that we don't wait for such a global summit about ecology. Is, for me, sorry to say, it's really a waste of time and money, but we need really to get one by one in our action. And as a coach, I'm trying to do that with the people, because it sounds very simple. Wise matter do not get a walk into the park or in the forest, but people are not doing, right? So I found out that my engagement is still at the beginning, of course, because it's something that I'm discovering by doing, by see how people react. And I think there is a lot we can do in terms of using our coach skills of be present with what people are needing in the moment, be listening to the needs, and also get them into the action. Because also when I'm doing the coaching, the nature, the action is coming. What can you do in your action can be into the nature, with the nature in somehow. So I believe that is, and also for me, it's connected with education. When Josie was asking, what can we do that I haven't done so far, or maybe Jass was asking to remember, I think we need really to start from the young generation, because if I look at the world where I'm living here now, there is a lot of policy, beautiful policy. But I guarantee you, no one of the adults are seriously following that, because the habits, right? We have our brain, our soma be into some standard, let's say, tendency, and they're not, it's so easy to be changed. So how, as a coach, I would say, can I go into the young generation? That's my next project next summer. I would like really to get the young generation work in the nature with me, with the 4 elements, with the seasons, whatever. So
Laura, thank you so much. You have really given us all an amazing understanding of what you are doing in China, which is so very much needed in this present health scare pandemic that we are going through. And one of the big takeaways that I have from what you're sharing is that what am I doing now? And in your case, to start creating those conversations and then taking it where it could make an impact. And some of our Ignite projects have been working with the youth leaders, and that has such a ripple effect. So we can talk more about it. But John had a point, so let's just hear him now. Hi, John.
Hey, Jass, good to see you. Great to see you, Josie and Fiona, and a couple of familiar faces. So first of all, thank you very much, Josie. As I kind of say all the time, your presentations always inspire me and kind of stretch me and challenge me in kind of slightly uncomfortable ways. So I'm very grateful to that, as always. They're not particularly enjoying it, but it's great. And thanks for the eco phase cycle. I have bought the book, and so I found it in the text, which is great. So I'm looking forward to reading that. I guess my question and maybe some thoughts from you, Josie, in terms of how you're managing this. So most of the clients that I'm working, so I work in organizational coaching, usually work with fairly senior leaders. And I'm thinking of one particular senior leader, and he works for a global company. You walk into their office, they've got a couple of sustainability development goals from the UN on the wall, a big, like they're making a big thing about sustainability, as most organizations do. And Lumke, your comment around ESG and how do leaders kind of deliver on that, I think to me is kind of where I want to focus with my coaching. One of the biggest challenges, I guess, in terms of getting people to, or getting leaders to really embrace that, is that the tension that they have with this kind of growth and capitalism performance, delivering what they need to in the moment, and what is mine to do now in terms of the longer term. So I don't think there's any challenge in kind of people being aware, or certainly the people that I talk to, aware of kind of what it is. I think that emotional disconnect, Josie, is absolutely there. So I kind of get that. But the other interference, I guess, is just the delivering on what they need to deliver, what the expectations of the organization on these leaders are to deliver, you know, from a performance perspective in the moment, doesn't actually leave much capacity, cognitive capacity or emotional capacity to, you know, to think about anything much more than work, a little bit of time for family, no time for well-being, you know. So I just wonder how you found that kind of conflict or tension and manage that with your coaching?
Yeah, it's huge, John. Thank you for the question. It's brilliant. So the changes that are required, and I refer to them as adaptive changes, not just adaptations out there in the environment, but psychological adaptation. Those adaptations are actually reprioritization of values. And really what businesses, and it's a huge challenge, and I'm not pretending this is easy, but I know what the challenge is. It's actually reprioritizing those values because they value profit above anything else. That is the neoliberal capitalistic framework, right? And so the question is, do they value money more than their children, more than their children's children, more than the future of the planet? And it's actually opening those conversations up. And that is a really challenging space. So when we look at some of the leaders of large companies like Shell, for example, I've forgotten the previous CEO's name, but he used to tell the story of arriving home one evening from work, and his teenager was there, and they'd just done environmental crisis at school. And his teenager bawled up to him in the hallway at home and said, "So, Dad, what are you doing?" And he had to answer the question. I think they are the sorts of experiences that these CEOs and many senior executives are actually facing. Most of them have got children, and it's not that they don't care. I don't believe that they don't care. They're actually operating in a system that is contrary to where we need to go. So they need help and support to actually move through that system. And for some of them, you know, some of the businesses that we might be coaching, quite frankly, they've got to close. Like, do we really need a business creating more little plastic things that spit out sugar toys? Like, do we need them? Is it serving humanity? And so some of them have got to go, I think. And that's a sad reality for some of them. Like fast fashion, how is that sustainable? And I think these are questions. So how can they actually move into businesses? And it's the same question that the fossil fuel industry is facing. How can we actually become energy businesses instead of just fossil fuel businesses? And how do we transform our business model in order to serve humanity rather than having humanity and the planet serving them? And it's not a simple, I don't have an answer beyond that, John.
Yeah, and I think one of the most powerful ways I've found when I'm working with teams, particularly executive teams, is having a seat at the table of their grandchildren, whether they're there or not, and to get their perspective. So you're making this decision, let's ask your grandchild, what do they say about this? So you're kind of pulling that future generation perspective into the current decision making, and it's surprisingly powerful, given that it's just an empty chair talking to them. But yeah, thanks, Josie. Appreciate that. Thanks, Jaz.
Thanks, John. And what you have brought up is it is a big task for us as coaches to think that we can do it all in terms of moving the clock for the leaders to make the decisions about a sustainable future and impact of their decisions. Why don't we just break it down in our own mind and say, at least I tried, or I contributed, or I did something to create that awareness. And that is so much more powerful to see that, okay, maybe they're not making a decision about it now, but their future decisions are going to be around this awareness. And as coaches, there are a few options and opportunities for us to do our piece, which is just like Laura said, let me just start with one person at a time. Let me work with one organization or maybe one leader with whom I can have these conversations in my coaching context and see how that is going to make the effect on a larger community out there. And so I'm going to go back into sharing more about the work that the ICF Foundation has been creating with the chapter leaders around the world, where we go in and work with an organization or a community, and we take a number of coaches who are volunteering and willing to put in their time for just a few hours perhaps, and and having these conversations with those leaders. And then when we follow that up over a period of time, the conscious awareness and the decisions that are being made by these leaders have definitely been shifted. And it is very rewarding when we as a coach see that, yes, I contributed and made a difference to some of the thought process. So as I continue to share a bit more, if you do have some questions around what could you do in using the foundation's work, our motive has been to continuously equip our coaches to not start from scratch. We already have a lot of systems in place, and on our website, you can find a lot of resources that can help you to start something. From today's conversation, I hope we can find, as Josie say, leverage points, and I'm talking about insertion points here, where we look at which organization or where can I do my part as a coach to create that insertion point, which means where can I use and amplify my coaching and get the organization to shift the needle. This way, we can formulate a certain chapter initiatives and continue to create the support system for you, so far as you can use the organizations in who are working towards the United Nations SDGs. And if you are interested or want to be part of any of the Ignite projects, you could contact any of the Council of Ambassadors globally. And it is our endeavor to help you initiate and execute such programs in the region that you're in. So there are certain criteria that are very generic that every coach except the project manager shall be credentialed, and the period of this pro bono coaching is maximum 6 months or at least 10 sessions, whichever comes first. So those are the two minimal criteria that we have in setting up or establishing an Ignite project. If you have any ideas to, so far we have completed a number of projects, and I'm happy to share more with you about which could be areas that you could look at, or you could visit our the ICF Foundation website to have more details. So thank you for that. Josie, hi. We have really got a very participatory and engaged community of coaches here. And I really want to thank you for taking your time and sharing such great details about some of the things which are possibly not in our conscious awareness through all of your expert learning and attending of these conventions and books that you brought to our attention. Anything that you would like to add or say to our coaches here?
Thank you, Jass. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Is there anything I'd like to say? Follow your hearts, I think. Let the messages sink in, look around, and follow your heart and your bit to do in this really complex, massive work. There's a space for everything. Like climate change is as much about social justice and gender issues as it is about carbon emissions. So really follow your heart and do your piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And if everyone did that, the jigsaw puzzle will be completed. So thank you very much for being here, and I wish you well, and really encourage you to consider checking out the Climate Coaching Alliance, free and open to all. And we've got a fabulous festival coming up in March with keynote speakers and people sharing what they've learned for absolutely free globally. It's a wonderful community. And if you would like some free resources, please just email Fiona. I think she's dropped her email address in the chat box. Our website's down this afternoon. We were just going to give you a link to a page, but feel free to send Fiona an email and she'll link you to the page on Monday when we're back in business again. So it's been wonderful to spend time with you. Thank you for giving up your time.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. If anybody wants to say something, please take a moment. Do you want to add anything to the conversation?
Yeah, I'll just add something. Thank you, Josie. That was, Felicity's my name. That was fantastic. I've worked in both sort of leadership and people development and sustainability and bio leadership. And I know that coaching is really key to linking those all together. So, and Laura, I loved your story from China. So yeah, everything resonates really well. I haven't bought the book, but I'm about to. So I will definitely look at the Climate Coaching Alliance. I just thought that everything resonated really strongly with me today. So thank you.
Felicity, awesome. Can I just say there's a special discount on the book till the end of November. Whiz Fiona a link and she'll give it to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Why? Anyone else? We have some comments here. Thank you. We'll follow up and share more of your contact. I think, Fiona, if you could please put your contact again. There is a request for it. Yeah. So as we're coming to the close of our conversation today, I think while we did address some of the stark reality and some of the data that Josie brought to our attention, but I think at the same time, I'm feeling hopeful. I'm looking at what is it that I can do and step into doing my bit at a very conscious level, bringing coaching as a platform to address some of the things which are in my capacity. And as everyone in this room who is a coach, you can play your part in creating that conscious coaching conversations and awareness, irrespective of it being permissible or not, allowing yourself to have the freedom of not getting caught into this thing, is this mine or not, but stepping into a space of power and saying, this is what I want to do. I want to take my coaching to that level where I am creating the conscious awareness. And it could be any topic. We've talked about climate change, but could be anything that really speaks to your heart so that you can follow and use your coaching to make that difference to a society that we live in, or a community that can be a better place for us and our future generations. So with that hopefulness and excitement, I thank you very much for being here and spending your valuable time early morning, 6 a.m. and 5 a.m. to be here. It is very meaningful for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.